All right, and good afternoon, and welcome to another custom system building tutorial. I want to specifically note that this is not a full one and done from beginning to end CSS tutorial. If you're interested in something like that, there are plenty of videos on YouTube that just cover CSS generally, and a lot of that information is applicable to Foundry and Custom System Builder. If you're looking for a personal recommendation of what kind of videos you might want to be looking at, I would actually recommend going through the Odin project. It's more text-based, like reading documentation. They provide you a lot of extra links and referrals of what other information you might want to do in case you feel like you don't quite understand a particular topic. They also provide a great structured environment where you're coding in a real development environment, so you don't just finish the tutorial and like, all right, now what? They give you hands-on experience from day one. If you're looking for something a little more passive and less intensive than that, that's not necessarily full web development, I would recommend John Hopkins' course on Coursera. It's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I've only completed the first 2 units there for HTML and CSS, and I can say they do a good job of introducing the basics of what's going on and why. They pay particular attention to element positioning as well, which can be kind of useful for, making your own bootstrap or handling different kind of displays. So with that being said, we're running version 4.6.6 on Foundry version 12. We have not upgraded to version 13 yet, but what we're going to be going over is pretty future-proof, especially the methods of which we're doing anything, if not the direct classes. The only module we have running right now is custom CSS. And if you watched our previous tutorial, you know that we use custom CSS as a way to quickly edit and modify our CSS between a couple sessions and persistent through refreshes. And then whenever we're done, a week or two later, we take it, cut it out, and put it into our regular custom system builder CSS file that you have to set up. If you want to learn how to set that up, you can refer back to the first tutorial where we go over that in detail. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I recommend doing when doing any kind of CSS or design work is making a mock-up, figuring out exactly what you want to do and where things are going to go. And while it might not be exact, it's going to be a very rough design. It at least stops you from wasting a lot of effort and refiguring things out and like removing things and placing them again and redesigning. So you can do this in professional programs like Photoshop. I've seen people do it in Canva or in GIMP. But since it's a rough draft and it's for your use, you could use anything. I did today's mock-up in Paint, but in the past I've even used PowerPoint or Google Slides. So as you can see here, we have 3 pages. The header does not change between any of the pages, and the left sidebar does not change. So this is our stats. So we used basic setup from 5e. We might be missing a few things since I'm just focused on showing you how to do things on CSS. But we have our 5 stats here for strength, dex, con. We have, our name, our class, everything pretty straightforward. We have a combat tab that's covering what we need when we're fighting. We have a loot tab for our inventory and items. And we have a social tab that's more about how to actually play this character, because I felt like that was a good way to break things up when you're looking at a character sheet from a user experience point of view. So with that being said, I've already went ahead and built this in Foundry since we've covered how to do this in our first tutorial. And here's what that sheet looks like in practice. Now, I haven't added in all the items, because this is just for practice, but placeholder items. So we have our class and our race as the only 2 items here. And we didn't really filter out a lot of these sheets just because, again, we're just showing on how to edit things in Custom System Builder. So the first thing I want to say is your console is going to look a little bit different than mine depending on what browser you're using. Since I'm using Firefox, mine's going to look like this. And you could open up your console by pressing F12. And you're going to have all the same things as I do. They just might look a little different or be in little different places. So this is my element inspector. And if I click it, whenever I hover over, it gets these wonderful blue colorings. And what that is it's showing me the digital space that the item is taking up. And that can be really useful, and you'll see why later. But let's say I want to look at my name, my character's name. If I click it, it actually pulls me straight to the HTML. It's in an input tag because it's editable and it's a text field, and that's under an H1. And for those who aren't too familiar with HTML, H1 is heading 1. So it's the biggest heading. H2 would be the next biggest, and H3 would be the next after that. So you can use that information for when you're actually doing your own HTML, but let's look at CSS. Now, you can edit CSS in this page actually. So if I click on my input and I edit that element down here, it says element, and I say color red, it will change and it will be immediate. But if I refresh the page or do any number of things, it'll actually forget that. So let's refresh that page and let's reopen Johnny, and it's back to being black. So this is actually a really good way to test quickly. Like if I don't know the right code that's going to work on a particular thing, I will test in here before adding it to custom CSS. And that's just because this is a little bit more permanent. This lasts if I close the server and open it back up. Or if you're on Forge, this might even be your just best long-term alternative. But I don't like to leave it here over multiple iterations because I don't know how well searching works within it, and if you have a couple thousand lines scrolling up and down, this thing might become a bit of a nightmare. So I take my code out of here and put it in a file later. But this is where I edit when I'm actually working. So if we wanted to do that here, we would start by saying h1, since we know that's a class. And then we could say class car name would do the same thing. And the reason this is doing the same thing is this is targeting every H1 in the sheet, which there might be multiple of. I'm not sure if titles are H1s. Let me see. No, they just have a class called title, but they're under an H3. So there might be another H1 somewhere on the sheet. I can't tell you for sure without searching it, which we can do right here. There's the character name. And it looks like character name actually is the only H1 in the sheet. So it would be safe to target with H1 unless you've done your own label. But just to be a little more specific, let's use car name because CSB provided us a class, car name, by default. And because input is holding the text, it's not just the H1. If you coded it with your own HTML, it would be. But because input is holding the text in this case, we need to target the input HTML label, and it doesn't get a period before it because it's a HTML tag and not a class that we're targeting. But car name is a class, so we're targeting with a period. And if you had an ID, which I don't believe Custom System Builder uses at any point, but if you coded it yourself, if you do an HTML, so like HTML, if you have a div with an ID equal to hi, to target that in CSS, it'd be hashtag hi, but that's less useful in Custom System Builder content or context. So we're going to target the car name class and then the input field. And the reason we do it this way is we're looking for any instance of car name and then any instance of input under car name, which should only realistically occur once because a car name only occurs once in the sheet and then it only has one input under it. But if I made my own label, it could appear multiple times. Or if I put car name as a class under any other input label, it'll do the same things. So just make sure we got the same thing. We're going to do color red. Perfect. Now H1, since it's a little bit bigger than the input, and I can actually visualize that for you by doing background color red, shows that's the input field. But if I just do the car name, it'll show you the H1's field. The H1 is what we're going to use for our positioning. And then we're going to use our styling on the input. So let's go ahead and figure out the style that we want for this to kind of match our layout. I would say we want no background color. So we're going to unset the background color. We're going to go back to default to get rid of that grayish background they do. The next thing is I don't really want that border. So I'm going to say border none. Fantastic. Next, I'm going to say display inline important. And now what this does is it's telling it when we're looking at the visual display of this item, we want it to be inline, meaning it can share space with other elements. And important means we're overriding something somewhere else. So this, pay more attention to this command than something else. Custom System Builder by default will have your H1 or your input displayed as likely a block. Let me see, display flex. So it's actually a flex, and we want it to be an inline. Inline flex is also an option, but right now let's just do inline. And actually that needs to be part of car name and not car name input. That's my fault for getting out of order. Car name, because we're dealing with positioning. So styling and positioning, two different things here. Let's also set this to have a max width of 35% and a minimum width of 35%. So it's always 35% of the screen. The next thing is, because I'm going to be using reload all character sheets from the template, even though I'm the GM, I don't want to see this. So let's go ahead and click on template. Let's see if they gave us a class anyone here. Custom Sheet Actions is a class that's provided by Custom System Builder. And let's go ahead and display none. Got rid of it. Awesome. You notice it also got rid of it on our template, which means we can't actually refresh that sheet anymore. And that's where it becomes important to know that you can actually use UUIDs as selectors. So there's my UUID, and here's the class. And because this is the template's UUID, it's actually only going to target items using that template. If I wanted to target it on the actual template and not the item underneath it, you notice div ID is template sheet actor, blah, blah, blah. So that's actually where the hashtag would come in place. So if I did hashtag that, it only affects my template and not my character sheet. But let's put it back because we want it only affecting our character sheet. So we want that display none. All right. The next thing is we want this to be less of a size so it can share space. And actually, now that I've clicked on this, I can see it's actually a bigger space than I want it to be still, even though it has a min and max width. And it looks like it's because there's width set by default by Custom System Builder for H1 inputs. So let's go back, important and important. Okay, what's going on next? It looks like it's because that's at the input level. And because it's display inline, needs to be inline block. There we go. So we needed this to be an inline block and just not an inline element. So there we go. What if I don't want that little red thing showing up when I click on it? Well, that's done at the input level. We can tell because when we looked at H1, it took up a little more space than the input. Let us say input : focus, which means it's been clicked. When it's focused, we want it to turn off its box shadow. I just know that element offhand because I've messed with this for a minute. But if you inspected it, when it's clicked, somewhere here you'll see focused. Oh, okay. So in Firefox, I can filter with the hover. I can say, so show me only what happens when I focus it. Input focus, box shadow. Here's where it's being defined. So if I wanted it to take that information, use it to find what variable is doing this, box shadow unset. And it might make me do important, but okay, so it didn't. So now it's just an editable box. I can click on it, but it doesn't show me the box anymore. Same is going to go for these tabbed panels. So that's something to be aware of for that. But next thing we're going to do is look at our class displayer. So if we go to that and we look, you might notice class display is actually a class already here. I'm clicking all over the place, my fault. So if I go to class display right here as part of the div that contains this item displayer. And actually, that is just because it's the component key. See, I didn't actually define another class. Component keys in Custom System Builder are by default defined as classes. And I actually put that class here as well. So it'll affect both race and class displayer. And you can use that to make things look like, well, other things. So if I take my class displayer with, let's see, I want to get rid of that first row. So we're going to go under the table that's under the class displayer. See, class displayer, table. We could do tbody as well and go down the list, but we don't really have to. Tbody is the only element under there. And if we say do tr under table, it doesn't matter that we skipped a line. It'll grab every tr under that item. But we only want the first instance that tr showed up. And just so you know, tr does stand for table row. So we can say tr colon nth child parenthesis 1. And what this does is say grab the first instance of tr. If we change that to, it'd be the second instance. And there's other things you can do like even or odd or other number of things as well. But we want to grab it and we want to say display none. We really don't want it to be here. Okay. Looks like I made a typo in my class name too. So we got rid of our column header there. Okay. Next, if we look back at my layout, I actually put the number before the class, or before the class name. So let's take our class display, and we want to take, we don't even have to type table, honestly. We could entirely skip table. But for me, I like to leave some of them if they help clarify the context or they help specify to a specific element. This doesn't help specify to an element, but to me it makes sense if I say the first row in the table under class display rather than the first row of class display. That's just however your workflow works is entirely up to you, as long as it makes sense if you or whoever else might be looking over it can understand it. So under class display, I want to grab the table. I want the tr nth child 2, which is the second row, which is going to be the one that has all of our content in it. Or I could say not 1 if I had more items or something like that. I believe that would work. Just as a test, we'll say not the first one. We'll do color background color red. And let's show this one. So that didn't appear to work. And is it because I forgot parentheses? It is because I forgot parentheses. So now anything with the class displayer class has a table that's a table row that's not the first child. You could do it absolutely like that if you want to grab everything but the header row. But in our case, we only have one item. So we could just say nth child 2. But we'll leave it like this because this feels a little more future-proofed. So let's say we want the td nth child 1, and this is going to be rogue. So for this, we're going to say we want all elements under that. So asterisk means all. So we could say every element that appears under this, which will be the span that contains this, the image, the text. If we click on it, we can actually see everything. So everything under that first TD is this span, is this A, is this image, and the text. So that's good. And we want to say with, actually if we do that, it's going to do 90% each level down. So this is going to be 90% of this, which is 90% of that, which is actually kind of, we don't want it to shrink like that each level. So let's actually remove the asterisk. Let's say with 100%. So now if we hover over it, it actually fills up as much space as it can, leaving as little as for those things. But let's actually cut it down to 90. Give it a little more breathing room. And now if we take this same thing here, and now we take the asterisk, and we say with 100%. So everything under this is 100% of that 90%. Doesn't seem to like to work. Let's try minimum width. Minimum width worked. It looks bad, but it worked. I don't want to have that image icon there, the little icon of the bag. So if I target its image, which we know is HTML image tag right there, then we can say display none to get rid of. But now my span is no longer taking up 100% of the TD. So what if we change this from that to span? What if we set it as important? Why is this not working? Because of the display type. If you hover over the little exclamation that happens after it, if it's grayed out, it'll tell you why it's not working. It's because the item is inline and it needs to be an inline block. So let's go ahead and say display inline block. Okay, now what's going on? Let's try just width. No? What about max width? No. Sometimes changing a couple things around here can help you figure out what's going on, but it doesn't appear to want to change its size. Let's try just block. Oh, it is working. If I hover over it, it's still blue. It's just not making the A underneath it. So if I do A as well, and the way I would do that is I want to comma, which means this and something else, do the same thing instead of span. No, in addition to span, do A. So we're grabbing the span and then the A underneath it. Save. Now it's 100%. And let's go ahead. Grab that. And this is just selecting the A element. I didn't need to grab the span specifically above it. And we can style it from here because this is where all our styling looks like it's happening. And say background color unset, border none. There we go. Font size 20 pixels. Perfect. Okay. Next thing is this entire table needs to be a certain size to accommodate this being 35%. So if we grab just the class display class and we say max width, if that's 35%, the most we can do is 65%, but let's leave a little wiggle room and say 60%. And then we also need to float it to the right. And what this is saying is because this is floated left, that this needs to go to the right. If I didn't float it right, these two items are stacked left. So it's trying to say left and left, so it's two lines. So if I do that, there. Now this cut over, because this is also floated left. And we can fix that. Let's see. There's a couple ways we could fix it. I'm trying to think what might be easiest. Class display actually grabbed this. These are both actually currently floated right. So if I grab race display, which I think I do is race disp, and we said float left, important because we need to pay more attention to this than where we set it earlier, and we select our race display, which should be this div. Float left important is not working because of its display type. And actually, instead of floating it left, I just realized we just need to set to something that's not inline. So display block is not inline because it's not inline block. Shouldn't be able to share a line. And it's because we're targeting race display and not the container that it's in. The container is acting different. So we gave it a class already called full width. I forgot we had to do this. So full width, display block, minimum width is 100%. And what this is doing is it's saying you're a block, you don't share any space, nothing else can be on your line, and you're the full width of the screen. Okay, full width worked, but now our race display is acting like our class display because we have a class there. And we can do race display and say float left important to override when we set it to float right for the class. Doesn't seem to want to work. Let's just go ahead and save ourselves a little grief because these items are not displayed exactly the same, and remove that class, and we'll just recode the few elements that are the same. I did that just to skip a few steps. Doesn't seem to want to do that, but there we go. Wrist display is now acting like it should. Width is 100% with display block, except for it's grabbing the items underneath it and also making it display as a block. Yeah, so let's just remove that. There we go. It's still 100%, but it's not displayed as a block, but that's perfectly fine. Next thing is we want this to display inline. It is. We also want it to be floated left. There we go. And now we have it sharing the line. If we look at our class display, for some reason, it's wanting to cram itself as far into the corner as it can get. Might be nervous. So min width 60%. So now it'll be min and max. That worked. So let's go ahead and set that in our custom CSS module. Save, and there we go. Johnny the Rogue. Now we did have the number before the name, which is just the referenced level. So if we change that there, that'll be 2. And we can do that by saying class display table, not the first row, and grab the second child. So we'll do that here and grab the second child. And we can tell this to float left, and then we can tell the first child here to float right, and they swap places. So there we go. We have a level 2 row. We can do some stuff with the padding or changing the font size, but since we kind of already covered that a little bit in the first one here, I really don't want to spend too much time repeating elements. If we want to remove the trash can, we could do the same thing with the nth child third and displaying none. So that's kind of our working with tables. I'll skip doing the same thing for these tables since we just covered exactly how to work with tables. And let's look at making XP take up a little bit of space close to the center. So let's go ahead and find what we have working here. I know I set it within a panel. And the reason I set 2 panels just to contain the same thing is because I needed a parent I could access. And I actually didn't give that parent a class, which is going to make your life a little bit more difficult, but I want to show you how to handle it when you don't have a class to access. Maybe it's a CSV panel or div. And so we're going to grab the panel below it that does have a class called xpcont. And we're going to say we want the div that has, so colon has, and that little greater than sign is, think of it like an arrow. We're pointing directly to, saying exactly under it, one level directly under it. Because if I said has.xpcont like this, it would target every div that has xpcont under it. So that would be this panel, here. It would actually, I'll just show you. I mean, it'll mess everything up. So we'll do background color red, because all this main body div has that class under it. But if I say only grab the div that directly has it under it, it'll only grab that one. So it's important to realize when you're only going one level deep, and telling it that specifically when you're using something like the has tag. So now we have the parent, and we're going to say display flex. And we want it to have a width of 100%, or a minimum width of 100%. And then we can justify content center, And that really won't look like it made a whole lot of changes, but it did push it a little bit towards the center. And now we can say, okay, great. Target XPCon directly. So this is the panel within it. And I want to target XP max is the component key that I want to target. So actually I could just skip straight to XP max and say justify, actually align content left should work. Didn't seem to work. What is the issue here? We want, looks like it's because there's a lot of things we need to target. Justify content's already actually set here as center. So we need to use the same tag, justify content, and we need to override it. There we go. So now that hugs up against it, so it's not like floating out weird way in the space for some unknown reason. And that's centered like the way we wanted it. Perfect. The next thing is that meter. I don't love that meter, and since we did get a question about it, we'll go ahead and spend a second going over that. So we could target all meters by grabbing the custom system meter class, but I really don't want to do that. So xpdist is the class for that meter. Class xpdiv. And we want to grab custom system meter under that. And we want to set it to have a max height 5 pixels. Since we're overriding custom system builder, we'll say important, min height 5 pixels as well. And for some reason, sometimes if you only do max, it won't actually change the size. And didn't seem to like that very much. It's because it's a class and I didn't include the period. There we go. Next thing, if I grab that same selector and add fill to the end of it, we can change the color. So if I say background color red, should go red. Because we're overriding the color, again, because it's custom system builder default, we had to add important, forgot about that. Next thing about this is I want to go over variables. If you scroll way down to the bottom, well, not quite the bottom, but really far down the list, you'll see a bunch of these dash color, blah, blah, blah. These are defined variables, and I'll show you how to set those real quick. If you type star, which as I said earlier, selects everything. So now we've selected everything, the whole global CSS right here. And if I said color red or something crazy here, it would look insane. But let's go ahead and leave it like that and say, under everything, I want the variable testy test face. Let's pick some crazy looking. Let's do like a blue. Yeah, that looks good. And we could take the RGB value. We could take the hex value. Doesn't really make a difference. And set it as the hex value here. And then we take that variable name, go down here, and we say variable, the variable name, still needs to be important. We actually can set that color multiple places without having to redefine and remember the hex value. So if actually I wanted our name to be that same color, I could say color, oh wait, that needs to be an input. I could say color var estimate test space. So now we've reused the same color in 2 spots without having to remember that hex code. Might be useful for you, but you can also just straight up use the ones provided by Foundry or grab the user color. But I want to grab the warning level color. So let's grab the warning color just because I like it. It's a nice orangish gold. Looks good. Great for an XP bar. And that's our header set up. And a lot of this is just going to keep reapplying itself over and over. But the next thing that we for sure haven't covered is grids. So I have this body that's called main grid, is the class I provided it, right here, that's breaking up the body into a grid of 2 columns. And if we look at the code for grid of 2 columns, there's a grid template columns line right here. And I actually want this grid to take up like this much space, like let's say 25% and 75%. So if I go 25%, 75%, that's actually what that just does. So let's go ahead and encode that in the CSS. So main grid, we want to grab grid template columns. I don't feel like typing that, so I'm just going to copy it. 25%, 75%, 1. There we go. So now we have it where our sections are here. So if I go to my stat container now and I say dot stat container, and I say I want all divs under that, that should just grab the stats div under that. We say background color red, just to see if it grabs all of them individually. Did not. Is there a typo in my component key? There was a typo in my component key. And see, grab the divs underneath, not the space in between them. So now I could say background color, I don't know. I could do the whole thing black and then these white might actually be a way to do that. So that might look kind of cool. Let's do that. Background color black. Background color white. Don't forget to close bracket. There we go. I also don't love the left margin, it looks like, on these. Let's figure out what's doing that. It looks like each div under this div is giving it a margin of 10 to the left. So if I say stat container div like that, so all divs under the div under the div, and say margin left none important. When you're dealing with margins, they're always set somewhere else, unfortunately, so you will be using importance a lot. That didn't seem to remove it. Why? Stat container, div. So yeah, this should be that level. Why is margin left not working? Did I not save? I did save. Margin left important. Where's the error? Invalid property value. 0 pixels. Okay. It just didn't like me saying none or unset there. So 0 pixels. Now we have everything nice and centered. We could say, you know, max width 80% if we wanted to give it a little more spacing around the sides there, like that. Let's go back to where we set the background color to white, and let's say border radius 5 pixels. And even though there's not a border, it's going to change the shape of the element from a square to have a little bit of a squircle, I think is what they're called. So we can change that value up to make it more. And then we can say margin top 10 pixels important. And I'll give every item under it a margin top of 10 pixels, but I don't really want it for every item. I just want it for the first div. So that's where that arrow key might come back in handy. And it seems to have not wanted to. Doesn't look like it's set, but it might have. Let's check. No, it worked exactly as intended. It's just 10 is not big enough to really notice. So let's do 20. There we go. And then let's say margin right 10 pixels. And you know, I could at this point just set margin all around to 20 or 10 pixels, which actually I'll go ahead and do. So it's in every direction. So it counts the sides as well. I normally do top or side if I'm only doing one, but when I'm dealing with all of them, it's not bad. And actually, I do want a bit of a margin on the bottom because it just looks a little funky without here. And we could say like 5 pixels. still seems to be affecting everything. So let's undo that, undo that, undo that. Stat container input, since we only have one input. Golly. Since we only have one input here, we can say specifically margin bottom by pixels. Looks like it worked, but it's not enough. Let's do 10. There we go. That looks a lot neater to me. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I know it was long, but I tried to focus on giving you the tools and information you need to succeed using CSS within Custom System Builder. There's a whole ton of information on the internet teaching you how to build some really cool things just for general web pages, and almost all of it's applicable to Foundry VTT. If you're still struggling, on the Custom System Builder GitLab, there is a link to the Foundry VTT Discord, as well as the official CSB channel. If the YouTube or the Discord isn't enough support and you feel like you need something more dedicated, I do offer one-on-one coaching where I show you how to solve the exact problems you're facing and try to cater to your learning style. Or if that's not what you're looking for, I do take commissions building parts of or entire character sheets, just depending on what best meets your needs. If you've noticed, for the last couple seconds while I've been talking, I've been showing parts of what I've been building for my own homebrew. And I hope you might be able to get some inspiration from something I've built to build something cool yourself. So best of luck and happy building.